Chat, welcome my friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we're doing bonus stream today. Bonus stream poggers, PogChamp, PogChat, etc., etc., etc. Oh, my goodness. What are we doing today, chat? What are we doing? So welcome to another stream, everybody. I'm feeling pretty good today because I get to hang out with y'all in the afternoon. A little bit tired. Woke up a little bit early today because, you know, children in school and whatnot. So we're just going to be chilling. And hair on my shoulder, right one? What does that mean? Parasocial hanging? How's it hanging, chat? Okay, let's see what we're doing today. What do y'all want to do? I think we're going to do there's some neat things that has happened, chat. We will do those neat things, I think. I hear that there are a couple of things that I'm supposed to react to. So I will do some reacting. We will do the reaction. All things are action and reaction. And then I think, how do I, hold on. The hair? What is the hair on my shoulder? What are you guys talking about? What hair on my shoulder? Hair? Hair what? Is this a meme? Finally first off in a week. Cool. What are y'all, oh, okay, I see there's a level 1 scam train. Sorry, I was AFK for like the first 10 minutes of... I see the hair on your right, further up your collar. Wait, what? Don't you fuck it? Is there a hair somewhere? On your shoulder. I don't see it. Alas, on your back, on your right shoulder. This is behind. What is happening? This is my right shoulder, right? Did I get my right and left confused? This thing? Wait, hold on. This? I don't know. All right. It's gone. The white hair? Yeah, dude. Dr. K has white hair. It's because you guys. I worry. I'm worrying so much about you nowadays. I'm wondering, is the chat going to be okay? Are they going to put their lives together? Is everything going to be all right? Will they find their inner peace, find their ambition, all of these things? I'm having the coffee today. Coffee. I'm worrying so much about you. You're giving me the gray hairs. So what do we, so let's see. So I think there's some stuff we're going to look into. Let's see. Ooh. Man, there's like actually a couple of cool things. Okay, but let me find this. So first, I've been told, okay. So we're going to react to this. And then, let's do this one. Okay. So let's take a quick look at some stuff. But before we do that, let's do announcements and, you know, a couple of things. So first thing is, yeah. So welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that everything we discussed on stream today is intended to be for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. So I know it sounds weird, but when I react to things on the internet, that's not actually real medical advice. So we're going to see what's going on. And a couple of other things. So our parent program is our orientation today, which was cool, lots of fun. It's interesting because one parent even said that they're like, yeah, my kid is in coaching themselves and they seem to be benefiting from it. So I'm here too, which I thought was interesting. There's also like another thing where like the parents started out and then towards the end I saw in the frame there was like a kid sitting next to them. So I don't know if that kid is paranoid or if they're part of our community. Like, we don't know. But our parent program is launching today, which is great. There's still some spots available, but it looks like we've got a good cohort of parents. And so we'll see where things go. I don't know if there are other announcements. I can't find them, but okay. Anyway, so let's go ahead and jump into stuff. So quick question. Were you guys... no, kids are not supposed to be there. It's not for children. We have a separate program for y'all, for the children. It's supposed to be for parents. The kids are not supposed to actually be there. So today, look, so here's the thing. We're going to be, I think, out next week. And so I'm just chilling because I'm not going to be around next week. So today's going to be easy peasy lemon squeezy. We're going to do whatever y'all want to. It's going to be just chilling. And yeah, I mean, where are the kids, right? What if the child is the parent? Then the universe implodes. Yeah, there were even questions about that. So I don't know how you guys felt about the sex ed stream. Were you guys okay with that? Or is that a good use of our time? Not good use of our time? Warhammer React stream to Warhammer Total War or what? Okay, so one person says it's okay. It was boring. I learned a lot. Not bad. Loved it. Yeah, it was good. Dope. Cool stream. Feels good, man. It was good. It was great. It was boring. Okay. So that's pretty much what happens here, right? So this is the big challenge is you can't make everybody happy all the time. So that's okay, I guess. I think, at the end of the day, our guiding compass is to try to help people. And, so hopefully for those of you that it was helpful for, I think a lot of times we underestimate we don't prioritize the audience members that are from developing countries or non-NA EU audience. 80% of our audience is NA EU. But I think that sometimes we have a very Eurocentric or Western kind of perspective. And so sometimes we'll make things that I think accommodate a little bit more to not Eastern in the sense of oh, yoga is in the East. It's Malaysia, right? Which is they, I don't know what their sex ed is like. So sometimes Latino America presente, let's go. That's great. South America gang. So the SA gang is growing, dude. So it's great. So we try to, and that's the thing, right? So we can't, I mean, sometimes I'm so North American that it's hard to sometimes remember that, there are other parts of the world. And so sometimes we try to accommodate them. Norway, nice. Uruguay. Yeah, Dota has large SA gang. I was a little bit surprised. So when I went to TI, so Eastern Europe and SA has a lot of healthy gamer fans. So I was surprised. There were SA teams and EU team. I mean, especially Eastern Europe that were oh yeah, we're big fans. It's cool. So cool. Okay. So let's go ahead and react to some things. Chat. And all right. So all streamers are depressed, and you guys can see here on the right what I spend my time doing, which is mostly watching StarCraft. Uh-oh. Hold on, let's do this. Let me put in headphones. Oh, no. Oh, God. I just plugged in my controller because I installed Monster Hunter World recently. As I was going through withdrawal from the Lost Ark beta, I needed something else. So let's see what's going on here. Okay, does this, y'all can see this, hear this?
Streamers being depressed?
Streamers?
Pack watch.
Depression. Anyway, don't call this Squid Game if you see me wearing on stream.
Depression.
So I was talking, like I've talked to a few streamers. I talked to XQC, Hassan, Mizzy, in my own feelings, even Saikuno, and I realized that every single streamer will readjust how they feel about how they're doing, like very quickly. So if they're like 10K Andy, like everyone was at one point, and then they jump to 20K Andy, they'll be like, oh, that's really exciting, it's cool, novel, and then they will immediately, like within a week, be like, I am a 20K Andy. Anything below that is bad.
Oh, yeah.
And then they'll be like, if I just hit 30K, I'll be happy.
It's called there's a lot of aspects here. One is called the disease of more. You just need more and more and more to fill the void, especially if you drop below some sort of watermark that's arbitrary.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really fucked up. Gambling's the same way. I would know.
What's funny is there's always a number, though, that'll be like, if I hit this, I will be happy. Like, if I can just consistently get 30K viewers, I'll be happy. And all of them, the answer is no. Like, even XQC, the biggest streamer on the platform, I remember during ShitCon, he was like 110K, like GTA RP, just killing it. Then he would like drop down to 60. He's streaming at like midnight to like 7 a.m. degenerate schedule. And then he was at ShitCon. He's like, yeah, I'm fucking washed, dude. Like, I got no content. And it's like he's mostly saying it in like an ironic way, but I think he like part of him like sees the night. He's not blind. He sees the fucking numbers. So they're all depressed and all thinking about it.
Are you depressed?
No. No, because you know what? This is what I realized what I did. I hit the subathon, fucking the largest penis on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. And
then I pivoted.
What?
Made the yard, made mogul merch. And now all of my like self-happiness is in those projects.
You sort of invested not your money, well, it's your money to an extent, but mostly your emotional self into different buckets.
What percentage of your happiness is in the yard?
You diversified.
What
percentage? The yard happiness it's like a solid like 12.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
Out
of what? No.
100?
Out of 100?
12%.
What did you think? Out of 1 million.
I just don't.
1 million credits, and it's 12 of them.
12%. Yeah, I don't know. I think
that's pretty good.
I think that you struggle to think critically about your own. See, that's what I'm saying. Right there.
Bro, you started
talking about.
Dude, you started talking, and he instantly was playing drums.
I know.
Like it's like. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that right now now you're an ape.
Okay.
Little head action?
Wow, that was pretty good.
Catchy.
Thanks, guys.
That's pretty
good. You really got it.
Anyway, they're all depressed except for me.
Yeah, I think
Who's the happiest
say,
streamer?
I'm confused about so much of this.
Nobody. It's a fucking
it would be like the gamers. Like Tyler 1, like the people who literally show up to play a video game they love, like Tens. Shroud's probably happy because he just shows up and just plays whatever game he wants.
I'm going to just pause this for a second. So I guess I was supposed to react to this. And sorry, so sometimes instead of reacting, I suppose I just listen. So let's just take a look at this too. So I saw that this was not the only, so I guess Ludwig and co were talking about, all streamers being depressed. And then there was this article, I think yesterday in the Wall Street Journal about Twitch live streamers talking about how playing games is hard work. And then like aching back, stress, and weight gain are job hazards for video gamers. And others who perform online for hours a day in front of an audience. For the most, the money isn't even that good. So you don't have to do this performing online. This is just the job hazards for gaming. You don't even have to be a streamer. You can still get aching back, stress, and weight gain. But so I wanted to share with you guys, like, so here's what I kind of think about this stuff, right? So this guy was talking about kind of this the hedonistic treadmill, or like the disease of more or whatever. So at this point at Healthy Gamer, we've worked with like hundreds of content creators. And here's like basically what we've learned, okay? So the first thing to understand about like mental health and content creators and like burnout and stuff, I've done burnout work at hospitals, I've done it at law firms, I've done it at investment banks, private equity firms, I've done it at colleges. And so the first thing to understand is that there are some aspects of burnout that are specific to a particular industry. And then there are some aspects of burnout that are actually like common, right? So a big thing that's going on with streamers nowadays is when they say like, oh, we're all depressed. I think there's legitimacy to that. We'll get to that in a second. But the first thing to understand is that there are some aspects of burnout that may be applicable to everyone, whether you're a college student or you work at an investment bank or you're a streamer. But one of the things that we really have learned is that technology and the situations that it creates, including streaming, have a set of specific challenges that are common within that industry. And those tend to be a little bit different from like standard kinds of burnout. So here's basically what happens with a streamer, okay? You start out with like, you start streaming, right? And at the beginning, it's fun. You've got like 5 viewers, you're doing it on the side. It's not like a part of your job or anything like that. You're going to show up on chat, like 3 people show up, y'all are vibing. They're having a good time, you're having a good time. There's no expectations about it, right? There's no, like, you're just doing it because it's fun. So that's like the beginning of the streamer life cycle, okay? So here's the streamer life cycle. It starts out, you're small, no expectations, whatever. Then you start growing. And then like maybe you start making a little bit of money, and that's like super exciting at the beginning, right? Like this is happening. It's a real thing. Your Twitch chat is loving you. Your stream is growing. People are posting about it. You get a clip on LSF, like yay, right? So 100 viewers, 200 viewers, 300 viewers, maybe you get rated by someone. You're up to like 1,000 viewers. And then the first realization of streaming sets in. And that is this axiom: if you're not growing, you're dying. So then your mind starts to think, okay, I've got 2 options, like either I'm growing or I'm dying, right? That's what happens on the internet. It's what happens in social media. It's like either people are growing or they're dying. And this becomes a serious problem because once you start creating content and like your content does well, this is the tricky thing. Why is it doing well? You don't know, right? Like you never really understand. It's not like you can do a biopsy to Twitch chat and figure out what's doing well and what isn't. Like something about what you're doing is kind of like organic and it's free and it's fun and people seem to be liking it. And if you've got to be growing, otherwise you're dying. So how do you grow more? You're not really sure because you don't really understand what's responsible for your growth in the first place. And so faced with this kind of idea of if you're not growing, you're dying, then what happens is you're like, I don't know how to consistently grow, right? And this is where the first phase of burnout kind of happens, which is like, I can't consistently grow. I don't know what this formula is. But what I can control, what is within my control to affect growing or dying, is how much I stream. So if I farm streaming, right? Like if I just stream for 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, if I do this, if I do that, if I just stream more, if I give more of myself to this thing, then my chances of growing are greater than my chances of dying. That's the only thing we can really figure out as streamers, is that I can increase the amount of time I spend on something to become more successful. So they start to give of themselves to the stream, right? And in really drastic situations, you end up with cases like Ice Poseidon, where like, he gave everything he had to his stream and it did not end well. So you have to grow or you're dying. That's phase 1. So you give of yourself and then you start to burn out. Phase 2 is you're kind of established. You're a streamer now. Now there's a financial incentive. And like you're sort of like you've quit your job, you're making enough money, you've made it as a streamer. So this is like where the gravy train is rolling in, right? You're making some money, you're paying your bills, people are vibing with you, you roll out your merch, like everything's going great. And so you should be happy at that point, right? No. Here's where the second revelation of streaming comes in. The sand in your hourglass is running out because no streamer lasts forever. So at the first phase, you're growing or dying, but eventually all organisms come to an end. Death is inevitable, right? You're not going to be like a 60-year-old streamer because that's what happens to streamers. So then what happens is streamers start to like think like, oh my God, I better milk this before I get small. There's going to be an inevitable reduction in my viewer count. And so I've got to milk it for as long as I can because I don't know if this is going to be around a year from now. I don't know if everyone's going to leave me a year from now. There's a lot of other things going into that. But then the sand in the hourglass starts running out. So then what you have to do is like, can you cut back on your stream hours? No. Now that you've started to be successful, if you start to cut back, people will leave, someone else will grow, it's going to be GG. So you better make the money while you can, you better grow while you can, because who knows when there's going to be someone who's funnier, sexier, more intelligent, more capable than you are who starts streaming and then they're going to take your viewers. So now you're trapped, right? Because this is an opportunity that will run out. Buy now because this sale ends at the end of the month. You have 3 days. If you order in the next 72 hours, you will get an additional 20% off. And then that opportunity will never come back to you ever again. And then everything that you've invested into streaming, because let's remember that you kind of quit your job, you dropped out of school and all that kind of stuff. You don't have any option B. So now like the sand in the hourglass is running out. So you better, go as hard as you can for as long as you can before it's too late. So now there's a fear, there's an uncertainty, there's a paranoia that all of your opportunity will be gone. Then you enter the third phase of streaming, the third phase of burnout in the streamer life cycle. And that's when like you've grown so big that suddenly like you feel trapped. I know it sounds kind of weird, but at some point you sort of figure out what the internet wants from you. And when you started out streaming, it was like streaming for fun, right? You did what you wanted to do and the internet responded to it. But then over time, what happens is like your audience has certain expectations. They expect quality from you. They expect perfection from you. They expect the same formula because that's how you succeed, right? You don't have like a successful content creator who is like cooking one day and playing WoW the next day and then like, you know, lecturing about calculus the third day. Streamers have a particular niche, and generally speaking, the more that you support that niche, the more you grow. But the more that you support that niche and the more you grow because of that niche, the more trapped you become. And so the third phase of burnout is like you've got 1 million followers and you have big streams, but you can't do what you feel like anymore because everyone wants you to be a particular thing, right? And we see this with like a lot of streamers. Well, it's not just streamers. It even happens with celebrities who get like typecast, right? So like that's the current incarnation of typecasting a celebrity. Is like a streamer gets trapped by the content they create. And then they fall into this problem where they can't really like, they don't want to do it anymore. It doesn't feel fun anymore. It's not organic. It's forced, but you can't stop because people expect it from you. And like, you just got to keep going. And so that's the third stage of burnout. So this is like the burnout life cycle for streamers that we have discovered after, you know, working with hundreds of streamers. We've discovered that there's actually like a specific and common thing within streaming as an industry that's different from like working at a law firm, for example. And this is what it looks like. On top of that, there are these things that I call amplifiers. So interlaced through all of this that amplifies the burnout at each step of the way is social media. So this is like a real problem because at every step of the way, social media and comparison are always happening. Because at each step of the way, there's like some kind of comparison that makes each of those 3 stages worse. When you're growing, there's someone else who's growing more than you are. When the sand in the hourglass is running out, when you're in phase 2, you see other streamers that are like you that begin to die, right? And then you're like, oh my God, like this person is fading away into nothingness and that's going to be me next. Or other people are blowing up while you are just growing, right? So you see other people who are eclipsing you. There's another WoW streamer now. Now there's a Lost Ark streamer. Oh my God, can you imagine how many MMO streamers started shitting their pants when Asmongold stopped streaming WoW? Just think about that for a second, right? I'm not blaming anyone in any of that, just to be clear, right? Because people should stream what they want to stream. But like Asmongold is coming for us, right? Like he's coming for our followers. That's the way that streamers reacted to him like changing games. And so like even at the second phase, it's like, oh my God, what happens if another streamer pops up or like, and they grow bigger than I do, or like a big streamer decides to get into that game. Am I going to grow? Am I not going to grow? Then you end up in the third phase where like you're looking around, you've got a bunch of followers, a lot of people are like liking your tweets, you start attracting hate farmers, by the way. So that's the other thing that happens when you get really big, right? Is there's a group of people that are hate farmers. And so these are people that have YouTube channels or like Twitch Reacts or whatever. And the purpose of their content, the food for their content is like reacting or trashing you as a very large streamer. So there's like a bunch of stuff that goes into this in terms of social media and comparison that just amplifies all 3 layers of burnout. And if you want to know, like, you know, why are people like this? You know, I totally get what people are saying. Like everyone's depressed and streaming. You know, like the Wall Street Journal, it's like even penetrated into like mainstream media, and the Wall Street Journal is writing an article about it. And why is that? It's because there's a particular thing going on, right? Like this is something that's a common shared experience that most content creators have. And so we try to help people with this stuff. I think that this is like part of the problem is that, you know, you can go see a psychiatrist or a therapist. And I know a lot of streamers that have really benefited from seeking mental health treatment, which I think is fantastic. And at the same time, like no one is going to teach you this in medical school, right? Like they're not going to teach you the content creator burnout life cycle because this is a new thing. There have not been studies published on this. So the best that we've got is like noobs like us, like actually working with these people for like a year or 2. And this is kind of what we conclude. So thankfully, Twitch is like pretty supportive about this kind of thing. So, you know, this stream sponsored by Twitch, not really, but I mean, like they're good. I think they recognize that this is a problem and like they've been pretty supportive. So we're grateful for that. And those of you, I mean, I guess you guys know, but we have a content creator program and like, this is legit. This is a real thing. I know it's kind of also different because usually we talk about y'all as the audience, right? So like our target audience here at Healthy Gamer is like the chat, right? It's not the streamer. And we sometimes interview big streamers and stuff, like we do that, but that also is not about, it's not so much about streaming, it's more about, like showing y'all that these are like regular, normal human beings who have regular, normal human struggles. So, I think it's, anyway. So if you guys want to understand, like, I completely agree that streamer mental health is tough. And we've seen a lot of burnout. And I think part of the problems is that there are new and specific things that relate to streamer mental health that like can be acted on in a specific and targeted way. And a lot of what we try to do is teach people like, okay, how do you learn? And I think Ludwig even talked about this. So how do you diversify your sense of identity and value outside of streaming? So this is a core thing. When your identity is tied up in your view count, right? Like how many people are watching, then as the view count goes up and down, your identity goes up and down with it. And the problem is because of the way that metrics work. So in the history of humanity, you've never been able to quantify the value of a human being as easily as you can today. So sure, like maybe 100 years ago, you had people who could quantify wealth in some way. You had kings and you had nobles and stuff like that, sure. But you also had like regular people who were like living on a street, and it's like, how much is each human being worth? It's like kind of weird because it wasn't quantified, right? You've got the more popular people, you've got the less popular people. And like, sure, there's clearly a hierarchy, but it's all kind of fuzzy. There's not like a number to it. And now what we've managed to do with the internet is we've like quantified our value as human beings. People are concerned about the social credit score in China. Like the social credit score happened here in the West way earlier than it happened in China. Right? It had to do with things like, and this is how you get like these choosing beggars where like, hey, I'd like to get a cupcake. And then the people like, okay, cool. Like it's $2 for a cupcake. And they're like, I have 100,000 Instagram followers. You should give it to me for free. This is my value as a human being. And it is worth more than $2. So give me a cupcake, please. Thank you very much. We have quantified value of human beings, right? We've already done it. It's there. And so now that we've like kind of done this, it's like messing up our society. It's kind of bizarre. We've done it already. And so now you've got streamers that are investing their sense of identity with a particular metric, right? That's what I'm worth as a human being. And if I behave in a particular way, so many more people like me, I get more likes, I get more followers, I get more subs. Fantastic. And this happens in other parts of our life too. So this is not just streamer specific. So this is a root issue in yoga called ahamkar, or the ego or the sense of identity. As a human being, when you identify and become one with some attribute of your life, your value as a human being goes up and down depending on that metric, right? So me personally, I'm invested in one thing, which is GME. And as GME goes up, I feel like I'm on top of the world. And as GME goes down, I feel like I've wasted all my time and my energy and my life savings into something that will blow up in my face. Right? And so like, that's what we do as human beings. For students, right? It's grades. Oh, I didn't get good grades, therefore I'm not a good human being. Sometimes in some devastating situations, it's also the way that we're treated by people like narcissistic parents. Like, oh, my narcissistic parent is mad at me, therefore I am a bad human being. So we peg our identity and our value as human beings to all kinds of metrics. And what happens when you're a content creator and streamer is that it becomes so easy for your brain to quantify your value by pegging it to these external things. So if you want to become healthier, if you want to become freer and ironically make better content, because that's, I think, what we've observed as well. Because remember, it's the thing that caused you to explode in the first place, that authenticity, that lack of expectation, that like, I'm going to show up on the internet and just like have a good time, that causes people to respond the best anyway. So like, it's all, I mean, there's like so much that's changing. And so you have to de-identify from, certain external metrics to find inner peace. Whether you're a student, whether you have a narcissistic parent, whether you're a streamer. Anyway. Oh yeah, that's a cool idea. Ahamkara. Peg enjoyers. GG. I can rely on chat to once again ignore the gist of what I am saying and latch onto one particular word. because like whatever part of your, I don't even know what part of the brain it is. Is it like the teenage boy brain? Like, what is that? Wait, is this because we gave a lecture on sex ed yesterday? Is that why this is happening? Is this the karma that I am reaping? Like, is that the consequence? Because here's the thing. I've been thinking to myself, and we as you know, the team here at AG has been thinking we should expect more from y'all. Y'all are capable of more. You secretly enjoy it. Do you guys see me being upset right now? I don't think this is secret enjoyment. This is public enjoyment. Right? All right. No, I do expect a lot from y'all. I think you guys should expect more from yourselves. Y'all should absolutely do that. Yeah, it's not copium, it's the truth. Right? So like we discovered this. Like our faith in you has been built and built and built with interview after interview after interview. We've had people on here who have served like 20 years in prison and y'all treated them well. We've had parents who can be quite judgmental, and y'all treated them well. We've had people with extreme political views, and y'all have treated them well. We've had female gamers, and y'all have treated them well. We've had male streamers, and y'all have treated them well. We've had ordinary noobs from our community who are awesome as well, and y'all have treated them well. And the truth is that when you know, I think like this kind of comes back to like, you know, when you have a kid who's struggling, half the time the answer is to like put them in a position of leadership as opposed to punish them. Seriously. Because like, expect more from yourselves and from each other. Because it's like, I know it sounds kind of weird, but when you expect nothing from another human being, it's like so easy to fall into that trap, right? For those of y'all that didn't grow up in the best situation, think about what your parents expected from you. And when everyone thought that you were an idiot who couldn't accomplish anything, like you're more than happy to fulfill their expectations. We see this a lot in addiction psychiatry as well, where like when some people start to become sober, everyone still thinks about them like an addict, right? And there's a good reason they kind of think about them that way. But sometimes we're not really able to see change in other human beings. And then the person who's trying to be sober has this really dangerous thought in their head, which is like, oh, if you think I'm an addict, like I might as well act like one, right? If you're going to punish me for something that I'm not doing anymore, like I might as well do it. You know, it's kind of like this really like toxic kind of self-sabotage, ego gratifying kind of thing where like, if this is the way that if I'm going to be punished for something, then I might as well do it. If you really think that I'm this way, then I might as well do it. So, you know. Okay. Oh, so just so people, I guess, for if you guys are curious, you know, we do have a content creator program. So we support content creators with their mental health. I guess I didn't say that explicitly, but so we have a program which is going really well, by the way. So like I think the data and stuff. So we've been running it for 1 year, and the data is like really good. And I think we're learning a lot, and that's helping us help more people. Because it's cool. Like, I think it's, personally, I find it exciting that there are like new things happening to people's minds. Generally speaking, some of it's bad, but, you know, I think it's like, we can figure this out. Like, it's cool. Like, we can figure this out. You know, keep going. So what do y'all want to do now? I don't know, like, we're just chilling today. You guys want to do like some Q&A? You guys just want to like hang out? Do we want to play a game? Like, what's going on? No, so I watched, we can do meditation. You guys like want to like learn about meditation? Can we get a poll? So like our options are meditation. We can lecture about something weird. Like if you guys want to do lecture about karma or spirituality, we can play something. We can play Dota probably. I want to watch Arcane. I watched the first like 3 minutes of it. It seems awesome. Very emotionally gripping. I don't know what Crab Game is. What is that? It's like Squid Game, right? Calling all tech tellers. Yeah, we can just do Q&A, like, what, that's fine. Y'all tell me, can we get, what we do? No, I can't watch Arcane on stream. Isn't that ban-worthy? I can't do that. We're just chilling, dude. We're just chilling. Oh yeah, there's no Reddit on the poll. Okay, so like, you remember, chat, so you guys, are y'all looking at these? Are you guys looking at these? These, what people are voting for? So remember when I said, like, you should expect more from yourselves? So I give y'all the option of a lecture on meditation, or watching something about LOL, or playing a video game, and 63% of you fuckers are picking meditation lecture. Like, how... Like, there's so much right with you. Do you guys get that? Like, expect more from yourselves. Seriously. Okay, looks like we're doing meditation lecture. All right, so... No, I'm serious. Right? Like, I'm not just saying that because... So this is the confusing thing once you become Dr. K. So once you become Dr. K, everyone thinks that, like, what you say is just like, oh, because, like, oh, he's Dr. K, like, he's just gonna be nice to me. But no, it's like, literally, like, I'm not just trying to be nice to you. It's like, look at the poll. This is data. Right? It's like, you guys are choosing to get a meditation lecture instead of watching stuff that's video game related. I voted for Dota, so I love you if you voted for Dota. And, you know, thank God there are not more people like you in chat, I suppose. Yeah, so data is the ultimate copium. You were correct. Zaralza. Redid poll for Q&A, folks. Okay. Thoughts on escitalopram? It can be good. Uh-oh, looks like Reddit posts are winning. It's close, chat. It's close. Reddit posts. Ooh, Reddit posts are in the lead. Okay. So, okay, it looks like Reddit posts are winning. All right, let's take a look at the Reddits. Okay. So some of these I've already looked at, but let's take a quick look. Okay. This is weird. Let's see. Okay, Reddit posts win. So let's take a look. So you guys pick, okay? Are y'all want me to pick, or you want to pick? Okay, let's just look. Let's look. All right, so I feel like I ruined my life at 21 years old before it even started. What do I do? Poll was too short. Okay. I don't have any motivation to even search for a therapist or find friends. 17F, suffering insane parental abuse. I came here from the I have too much self-awareness video. I don't feel like I'm capable of having healthy opposite sex relationships. I feel like I'm manipulating a girl that I'm dating, and Dr. K is the one to blame. That's dark mode, please. How do I dark mode? Let me see. How do I do this? Dark mode. Dark mode, dark mode. Settings. Nope. GG. Get wrecked, noobs. Dark mode in chat. Don't get clickbaited. But it's so hard, dude. I feel like I gotta do this. This one has the most upvotes, too. Look at this. So let's take a look at this one. Okay. Hi, everyone. I-23M started dating this awesome girl, 20F, recently, and we connected really, really well. Uh-oh. How are you blind? What? What? Hold on. I think top right of Reddit. Nice. Done. Okay? By the way, for those of you that are messaging me, it's not, it's not that I don't want to respond. It's just I get like hundreds of messages a day. So I love y'all. I really do. But it's nothing personal. So hi, everyone. I-23M started dating this awesome girl, 20F, recently, and we connected really, really well. We talked for hours about our emotions in a way that I never thought I could have with anyone, and even more when sober, lol. She is very emotionally intelligent and an excellent communicator. Because of that, it's very easy to understand her feelings, struggles, and experiences, meaning that I don't need to make any effort to understand and feel empathy towards her. When I'm sharing my struggles, feelings, and experiences, it's just wonderful. I can see that she really cares about me, that she is paying attention to every word I say and expression that I make, and she asks really good questions, etc. I don't feel judged in any way, so it's safe to say that I can trust her when I'm sharing my flaws and insecurities. So I'm waiting, or is anyone else like waiting for the next shoe to drop, or what's happening here? My problem is, in those conversations, I'm often self-aware that basically everything that I know and talk about, I learned from Healthy Gamer GG. Or other internet sources. If I'm not self-aware while this conversation is still happening, surely soon will be after the conversation is over. I'm self-aware that basically everything that I know, okay? Although we talk in a totally different language, it's like every word that comes out of my mouth is not mine. The confusing part is I'm confident enough to say that I truly understand what I'm talking about. A portion of it is because some of it also comes from my own experiences. At the same time, I feel like the knowledge to understand those things is not mine in the first place. I'm starting to feel like I'm tricking her into believing that I know about mental health more than I actually do, meaning that she likes me for something that is not me or mine. For example, interesting. So, for example, when she was sharing that she's anxious all the time and how was growing up in her household, I said something like, since you were a child, you had to anticipate the worst outcomes to every action you take to protect yourself. You didn't have any other option besides developing anxiety to survive. That's why now it is so hard for you to not be anxious all the time. It's something that helped you when you needed help the most. I can't point exactly where I heard something extremely similar like that, but I'm sure it was from a Dr. K streamer video. My question is, am I tricking her in any way into believing I'm something that I'm not, or do I have the right to share my perception about mental health, even though I'm not the one who came up with all of it? Thanks to everyone who took time to read my post. It means a lot. I point out whenever I can to her that I'm not an authority on the subject, let alone capable of providing professional support. Okay, this is interesting. All right, so here's someone who has spent a lot of time learning things and is discovering, to his great surprise, that the things that he somehow learns because he didn't discover himself are not really, he's not entitled to share it, right? So he kind of feels like everything he's learned from somewhere else. It's not really his discovery. You don't really own the information. And so you kind of feel like you're kind of cheating on the test, right? You're giving someone the right answers, but you cheated on the test. And so, my question is, am I tricking her into believing I'm something that I'm not, or do I have the right to share my perception about mental health, even though I'm not the one who came up with all of it? Okay, so that's a good question. It's interesting. The first thing that I want to do is point out that, even the post has a lot of self-awareness. So in a sense, this is the thing, chat. So here's someone who's a 23-year-old dude who's vibing with a 20-year-old chick, right? So that's cool. And And then like they're very like communicative and emotionally supportive and they're getting along, which is like why we're on the internet. That's an example of why we do this, right? So good job. I'm really proud of you. And it makes me feel good about the work that we do. Because the whole point of this is that like you can learn these things, apply them in your own life, and like actually connect with other human beings. And that you can actually be like a helpful and useful source of goodness and positivity. Now what you need to do is induct her fully into the cult. Good job. Right? No, but seriously, that's why we're here. So, and at the same time, I kind of, right? So now bring her in as well. And then just start tithing 10% of your income. No, you don't need to tithe any of your income. We're good. Thank you very much. For everyone who does donate, we appreciate it. But you don't need to donate, right? It's not, donating to us does not send your soul to heaven. So so let's like think about this. So we can go two directions with this chat. One is like sort of a standard direction. And the second that we can kind of go on, maybe because I'm on this bend, is to understand who owns knowledge and where does knowledge come from. This is like more of a meditative thing, okay? So the first thing that I'd say is like when this person says like, you know, do I have the right to share my perception about mental health? Bro, that's like a struggle that I had for like 10 years, right? So when I was like training, and I don't know if you guys get this, but you know, most of what I teach on the internet is not like my discovery. Y'all get that? Like it's repackaged, but like I spent 7 years studying to become a monk and like 10 years doing neuroscience research and like studying to become a psychiatrist. So like what I am passing along to you, it's repost. Well said. Healthy Gamer is one massive repost for all of the books on the bookshelf. I can't, right? So we have all these books back there. And like what I did is read all those books and then learn all those things and then share them with y'all. So this is not my knowledge. Knowledge is not owned by an individual person. And so I think it sort of makes sense that you've got to be a little bit careful because I think you are getting a little bit diagnostic there in terms of this is why you're like formulating another human being, which you got to be careful about. You really have to understand what you're talking about in order to do that. But it sounds like you do understand. So the first thing to understand is knowledge is not really owned by a particular person. Now, we do have, you know, patents and things like that, which I think makes sense because I think a lot of work can go into the packaging of knowledge. But generally speaking, it's not like the ideas of like karma or dharma or motivation are owned by a particular person. So everyone has a right to the knowledge. Like that's why we sort of teach it. We do our best to teach it freely. Sometimes we charge for particular services and stuff like that, but that's because they cost like a hell of a lot of money to make, right? And sometimes we're also like, you know, we charge for coaching because we want to pay coaches. So there are some things that, but generally speaking, like knowledge is not something that's owned by a particular person. The other thing that's kind of interesting, so I'm going to ask y'all a question. So if you really want to understand this, so this is where like I could respond to the post and I could say, no, you're doing great. Everything's fantastic. Go for it. But I want y'all to understand that if you really want to overcome this sentiment, you have to understand where knowledge comes from. So let me ask you guys, where does knowledge come from? What do y'all think? Okay. So there's like, you know, there's some Twitch chatter who's saying the butt, which that's a whole other cult. Right? So some people are saying like, I can't tell what's a real answer and what isn't. So some people are saying experience and some people are saying from like books. So let's try to understand, you know, like let's think about that for a second. Let's say I sit down and I have a book here, right? So I have a book called Meditation from the Tantras, okay? So when I open this book and I read it, all right, like what is the process of, like, where does this knowledge come from? Right? So, like, I know it sounds kind of weird, but, like, when I read the words on the page, do I gain knowledge? Yes and no. So like, this is where, man, I wish we were like, I could talk to a human because this is slow. So when people say repetition, so someone's saying repetition. So let's think about that for a second. If I read a book 3 times, do I gain the knowledge in it? And some people are saying maybe. So the yogis in ancient India came to an interesting conclusion. And their conclusion is that all knowledge comes from within. That there may be triggers for your internal understanding, but that essentially no knowledge can come from the outside. That essentially you can make observations, but the act or the essence of knowledge does not come from watching. Because like before Isaac Newton, I know this is apocryphal, but before Isaac Newton saw an apple fall and was like, oh my God, there's gravity. Like human beings had seen apples fall a lot, right? Like that information was already in the world. It had been there for a long time. Even information about physics and like science, and there's all kinds of information that has existed within the world for a long period of time. Even within one book. I can read it and get nothing from it, or I can read it and get a lot from it. And so essentially repetition is like making a knowledge check, DC 15. And so on the first check, sometimes I can do really good. Otherwise, I fail if like I'm trying to study and there's a lot of noise, right? Then it's like I get a -5 penalty to my DC 15 check. And if I'm super in the zone and I meditated this morning, then for example, I get a +5 and it's like DC 15. But at the end of the day, I can read this book 10 times and learn nothing, or read it once and learn a lot of things. And so if the knowledge were truly in the page, then I should read it once and I should get it, right? The other thing is if knowledge were truly external, no one would be able to write a book. Because if you think about just the process of writing a book, like the person who wrote this, it didn't exist before. It had to come with it from within. So the yogis actually concluded that all knowledge comes from within. And so they also they went a little crazier, and they sort of realized that there's this thing called cosmic consciousness. And as we connect with cosmic consciousness, we gain more realizations. And so there's a lot of information out there in the outside world, but the process of understanding happens internally. And there's like basically this gigantic supercomputer that has all of the understanding of the universe. And it is our ability to connect with that supercomputer and download that understanding from the supercomputer that results in understanding. And so that's kind of like a bizarre way of thinking about it, right? Like it's not really how we think about it. But this is where let's understand how they came up with this conclusion. So they came up with this conclusion through observation of themselves. And so this is sort of like another Jnana Yoga practice that we're going to share with you. So I want y'all to think about where understanding comes from, right? So sit down and look at a book, read a book that you haven't read before, and try to figure out like, where is the actual understanding coming from? Is it coming from the book or is it coming from me? What is the function of the book? And the best I can kind of say is that for me, what it feels like is a trigger. It feels like books are keys to locks within myself. There's like a box of understanding within me, and if I find the right key, I can open it up, but like that the understanding is within me. And as someone is sort of saying, it stimulates your thoughts. Like that's been my experience, that the thoughts actually happen up here, and all I need is the right kind of stimulation to bring out the right kind of understanding, right? And so this is even the word someone else in chat is saying, eureka. So like even the original word genius is not a person. It's like a temporary effect that hits you, right? Genius is a state of mind. It's not a human being. That's changed as our language has changed. But even like the ancient Greeks sort of conceived of it that way. That eureka, understanding, the light bulb going off in your head. It's not like even in our iconography, it's not like the light bulb is shown up here. The light bulb is above my head. So understanding happens entirely internally. And so it's kind of a drastic way of thinking about it. But then if you sort of think about it, then like no person, like the ownership of the knowledge is within that cosmic consciousness, is not owned by any particular person. Anyone can access it. And this is also why if you sort of think about it, like multiple human beings can make the same discovery, right? How is that even possible? It's kind of bizarre. Because it implies that even the word discovery implies that the knowledge already exists. It's just about our ability to access it. And this is where we sort of think in the West that discovery happens externally, but it doesn't happen externally. It happens internally. And you can even look at things like Nobel Prize winning experiments in medicine, and you can sort of see that. There's very interesting interviews. Like if you read interviews from Nobel laureates in physiology and medicine about what kind of discovery they made, it's like really interesting because most of it is internal. So what happened is like the data's always been there. It's the interpretation of the data which is revolutionary. And in fact, what they do is so this is going to get kind of tangential, but I think it's like really proves a point. So the world conceives of physiology in a particular way. This is how physiology works. So the external world's representation of physiology is a particular way. The way you become a Nobel laureate in physiology is that you look at the external world and you have a revelation in here which you communicate to the rest of the world, and then the rest of the world's sense of physiology changes. Do you guys get that? Scientific discovery does not happen externally. In fact, it is an internal revelation that changes the external landscape of science. That's what a scientific discovery truly is, which is kind of bizarre because it's the very opposite of what we think about, right? We think about science as an external discovery. Does that make sense? Okay, hold on. Does that work? No. Blurry. I feel like there we go. So it's a very bizarre way of thinking about it. So if you guys really want to understand this, like, you should just explore it yourself, see for yourself. Because if you kind of think about it, how can someone conceive of a book? Like, how does that happen? Right? Like, it just comes from somewhere, but you don't know where it comes from. Like, you can come up with an idea. So this is like, we sort of take it for granted that we have creativity within us. Like, wait a second, hold on. How does that work? Where does creativity come from? It's bizarre. Yeah, so so this is where, like, philosophically, I encourage y'all to think a little bit about, what happens in science. Like, you have an experiment, and then the external world shows you something, and the process of science is revealing, right? It's a process of revelation and discovery, not creation. So everything is already there. So even if you look at like old Sanskrit texts, they actually describe physics with this word mahat, which means cosmic intelligence. So they actually like talk about the law, the laws of the universe and physics. They refer to it as a cosmic intelligence. And understanding of those things is like, it's kind of weird. So like, it's just strange. It's a different perception that once you start to meditate and once you really look at yourself. So like the next time you're studying, I strongly encourage you to think about, where does the understanding come from? Does it truly come from the book? And what's the best way to understand? So here's a studying tip. So like, if the knowledge truly comes from the book, which we know scientifically, we'll get to this in a second, but then the best thing to do is to read the book over and over and over again. But what we know from like the science of studying is that the most effective way to study is not repeating the intake of information. The most effective way of studying is to practice bringing stuff out, right? That's why, like, doing, if I have a choice between reading a book chapter 5 times or reading a book chapter twice and doing 3 practice tests, the student who reads the book chapter twice and does 3 practice tests will score higher than the person who reads the book chapter 5 times. It is the act of recall that correlates with better performance on tests. And if we think about what is recall, like, that also is kind of a bizarre process if you really stop and look at it. Like, you're just like floating around like I'm talking to Twitch, and then suddenly like someone asks me a question, and out of the ether of my mind, an answer shoots forward. Right? It's like really bizarre. So by the way, I mean, we just talked about it now, but if you guys are more interested in this stuff, there's the path of knowledge, or the Jnanapada, in Dr. K's guide to meditation. So the Jnanapada explains like some of these concepts and how to study and like how to learn and like different types of knowledge and stuff like that. So check that out if y'all are interested. Okay. Another quick thing to remember. For those of you that feel like your recall is messed up, So here's what I've discovered as a psychiatrist. If you feel like your recall sucks and your memory sucks, 75% of the time, your memory is fine. It is your attention that's the problem. So remember that in order to recall something, it has to be implanted first. And most young people who have trouble recalling things don't actually have any trouble with recall. They actually have trouble with implantation. So if you don't attend to a particular stimulus, it will never get planted in your brain, which means that you will forget. Because what we call forgetting is attempting to recall something, but if nothing is there, or we knew it once and we forgot it, we both interpret both of those things as forget. So if you think about losing your keys, for example, the problem with losing your keys is that you never knew where they were in the first place, right? You were not paying attention when you set them down somewhere. How do you lose things around the house? It's not that you knew where it was and then you forgot. It's that you never attended to it in the first place. So if you all have trouble with recall, what you need to do is practice and train your attention. Does that make sense? So training attention, by the way, is like one of the most underdeveloped skills in society. Like training your attention is like OP chat. How do you train your attention with ADHD? The simplest way is actually to meditate. So any kind of meditation will strengthen your attention for the most part. This is why I think breath meditations are good. The rotating sound awareness meditation is good. So remember that with ADHD, what you want is a meditation that has a variable stimulus. So what I mean by that is like something that your mind can stay in the same zone, but move around within that zone. So you can rotate from one sound to another. You can look at lots of different leaves on a tree. So like, for example, what you can do is like step outside or look outside your window and try to see as many objects as you can as rapidly as you can. So that's a rotating sight meditation. So there's like, grass there, ant mound there, tree there, leaves over here, acorns here, dog poop there, dog over there, person over there, car over there, and rotate through them. Just sit calmly with your back straight, look out onto the world, and just see as many things as you can. And so even though your mind has a tendency to want to move, so you want to let it move if you've got ADHD, but you're still encompassing it within the space of where you're just going to look at random things. And I'm telling y'all to do it outside for a reason. Okay? So you got to be careful because you don't want to interpret what you see. So when you look at 6 consoles in your room, for example, you're going to start thinking about games and then you'll no longer be doing the practice. It's far easier to slip up with interpretation in your room than it is to slip up with interpretation outside. How often do you have to do it until improvement? So most of the studies on meditation require about 20 minutes of practice at least 3 days a week for 8 weeks. That's when you will see a statistically significant change in some kind of symptom like attention. So that's about 8 weeks is about how long it takes to start to see like neuronal change. And now that also is like a broad scale conclusion, okay? It's like I've read like probably 300 studies on meditation. And if you average them all together, they're like 8-week studies and people see like change. Is the effect size reasonable? Absolutely. So, for meditation, for example, like I'll expect a 20% improvement on average in symptoms from meditation. That's what I would expect as a clinician. So someone's asking, why does my inner knowledge not help me stay out of bed in the morning? Because you don't actually have your inner knowledge, right? So the whole problem is that you were separated from that perfect knowledge. And as we get closer and closer to the knowledge, so I know this sounds kind of weird too, but like we're going to talk about addiction psychiatry for a second. So people who are addicted to a substance and know they're addicted to a substance know they should stop using it. They're just unable to. Right? And then what happens is like one day they wake up and they say, enough is enough. I'm done drinking. And they'll stick to it. And it's like, if you ask them like, what? Like, how did you stick with it? Because you just said one day enough is enough. And there are other people who will also wake up and say, today's the last day, enough is enough. And then they start drinking like 3 days later. What's the difference between these two people? Right? So I'm serious. If you talk to people as illogical as it is, this is what people will say. So the majority of human beings who overcome alcohol addiction actually do so without any kind of professional help. They do it all by themselves or through peer support groups like AA. So what happens is like our ability, like revelation and understanding or jnana is like an internal process of change that drives behavioral change. So information does not drive behavioral change. Understanding drives behavioral change. For example, if I tell you the stove is hot, the stove is hot, the stove is hot, don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. And then like, you'll touch it. And then once you get burned, you're never going to touch it again. So the difference is information. I can give you information. It's not going to create behavioral change. Understanding is what creates behavioral change. That's what's so hard that's what confuses people when they come into coaching. Because they come into coaching and they're like, I thought you had all the answers. Like, give me the plan, give me the curriculum. And what we train our coaches to do is not to give them information, because information is available. Like, you can Google stuff, you can watch YouTube videos forever. It's about how to catalyze understanding, and that can't be transmitted easily. So we have a society that is biased towards information transmission as opposed to like the catalyzing of understanding. Oh my God, it's so hard to keep up with it. Dude, the comments are so good. It's so hard to keep up. Yeah, so this guy's saying once I found, or woman, once I found out I was self-medicating my ADHD with weed, alcohol, and nicotine and properly diagnosed with ADHD, my drinking went from daily to maybe once a month at most. Absolutely, like that's what we see. By the way, we did a long lecture about ADHD and substance use. If you guys, maybe it's on YouTube now. So, yeah. So some people are super addicted. I wish it was that simple, my man. So I know this sounds kind of weird, but it is that simple. But let's remember, so this is a really important thing that, actually Osho emphasized this a lot. Super scandalous dude. But remember that the simpler it is, the harder it is. So the mind loves complexity. This is something that you guys need to understand. So, in the things that you suck at in life, chances are your mind will make them complex. And the more complex they are, the easier it is to absolve yourself of responsibility. So we hate simple things. The mind detests simplicity. It loves complexity because the mind is a thinking machine. And the more complexity you give it, the more food it has. So I'll give you just a simple example, okay? So like when someone's late for something, the more factors and the more complex the reason that they're late, the more BS of a reason it is. Am I right or am I wrong? Y'all tell me. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was late picking you up at the airport. First this happened with my dog, and then this happened with my car, and then this happened, and then this happened. So many complex things. It's not my fault. It's not under my control. Cut me some slack. Easy. Protective of the ego. No responsibility. So complex. All of these things need to be changed. Look, the world needs to adapt in these 16 different ways, and then everything would be fine. I don't have to change. There's nothing simple. Whereas in simplicity, yeah, I managed my time poorly and I should do a better job. It's that simple. But that's difficult. It's hard to own. The ego hates that. The mind hates it because what the hell is the mind supposed to think about then? The mind wants food, right? So this is another reason this is something to understand, which is like, the mind hates being still. It always wants stimulation. It's the reason that video games are addictive, and this is kind of wild. It's the same reason you look at pictures of you stalk your ex's social media when you're feeling down on yourself. Like, think about this for a second, okay? You've got an ex. When you're feeling bad about yourself, and your mind is like, hey, you're a dumbass. What does your mind do? It's like, hey, let's go look at how happy our ex is. Like, what the hell? What is going on there? The biggest problem is that we think that our mind is designed to help us. It's not designed to help us. It's hungry and it wants food. And what is the one thing it gets from looking at pictures of your ex on social media? An endless supply of food and an endless supply of emotional energy that it beats the crap out of you with. Right? It's like so bizarre. And then if you're not careful, because then the mind starts to think, oh, if I'd done this, if I'd done this, if I'd done this, if I'd done this, if I'd done this. And then it gets 6 hours of like food to think and keep you up at night. Right? So this is also why, like, you guys know what the hardest thing there. So people will choose to spend time looking at stalking pictures of their ex on social media that emotionally hurts them every minute that they do it, drains them energetically, screws them up the next day. Why on earth would you do that? What else could you do that the mind wants to avoid at all costs? Do y'all know what the mind wants to avoid at all costs? What is the thing that the mind hates more than anything else? Not suffering, not pain, not discomfort. Boredom. There you go, boredom. So your mind, if you're sitting in bed at night, just think about this for a second, okay? If you are sitting in bed at night and you were bored, your mind will prefer looking at things that incur you pain, because then at least it's getting something, to being bored. Boredom is starvation for the mind, which is why it avoids it at all cost. And so if you think about like all of the things that screw us in life, it is the hunger of the mind that seeks video games, that seeks self-torturing FOMO crap on social media. But even though we suffer, the mind is getting tons of stuff to think about. Think about anxiety. Anxiety is never-ending food for the mind. Oh, I can worry about this and I can worry about this, but what if this happens and what if this happens and what if this happens and what if this happens? The anxiety is addictive. You guys realize that? And so what is meditation? Why is meditation hard? What is spirituality? Why is all this stuff hard? Meditating is training your mind to be bored, right? It's sitting and not giving it anything to engage in. It's like we can engage a little bit, but what we actually want to do is disarm it. We want to stop the function of the mind. And what we discover is as people stop engaging with the mind, they become happier. They become more productive. It's bizarre. But like, it's resisted at all costs, right? At one end of the spectrum is like whatever dopaminergic technology crap we've got. At the other end of the spectrum is like sitting down and like not using any technology. Which one would you prefer? And if you guys, here's another jnana yoga exercise, okay? This is the most devilish one I've ever come up with. I've tossed this one out a couple of times. Next time you go to the bathroom, no technology, no phones, right? No phones. Watch what happens within yourself. Got to take a dump. You're going to be in there for a while. No technology, nothing to read, nothing to do. You're just going to sit there, take your dump. That's it. Right? And everyone's like, oh, no shot. I have books. Joke's on you. No books. Nothing. Just you. And just see how hard it is for you. Right? So this is like, why do you guys think technology is so damn addictive? Because it is an antidote to boredom. This is what people have discovered. How can we increase user engagement? How can we keep people from being bored? There's no fulfillment in technology. It's just boredom. I saw this quote where Tim Cook, I think, or someone from Apple, was saying that they don't want their Apple devices to be like used for mindless scrolling. And it's like, great. That's how they're designed. Right? Like, that's your whole business model. So it's like, cool. I'm really happy to hear that. Like, I really hope they move in that direction. But like, everyone who is in app development is going to be like tearing out their hair if you try to move in the opposite direction. Yeah, so someone's quoting Netflix CEO Reed Hastings once said, "We want you to think about Netflix even in your sleep." Yeah, I think that's what people are doing, right? Yeah, so someone's asking, how do I not get bored on stream? So this is kind of weird. So I know it sounds sort of weird, but boredom, this is going to sound weird. So how do you not get bored? So the first thing to understand is that like boredom is not technically determined by any external things. Boredom is your internal reaction to external things. So if you guys think that's kind of weird, like you can play WoW and you can have fun, or you can play WoW and you can be bored. Right? Like you can go for a walk, or you can sit in a car and you can be bored, or you can sit in a car and not be bored. You can listen to your significant other talk about their day and you can be bored, or you can listen to your significant other and not be bored. So it's kind of interesting because if those are scientifically true statements, then what that means is that there is some influence you have on the boredom. This is the biggest thing that people don't understand about boredom. They assume that the antidote to boredom is on the outside. So if I have my phone, I won't be bored, which is why you take it with you to the bathroom. But if you spend a ton of time on your phone, are you bored? Yeah, you're still bored. It's interesting, right? So then the question becomes, if there is some influence that you bring to boredom, then the question becomes, how big of an influence is it? So we see this a lot on our subreddit where people are like, I tried studying this, I tried doing this, I tried doing this, and like, I'm not motivated. I'm bored by all of the subjects in school. And so like, when you see like, okay, I've tried studying 6 different things, I find all of them boring. It's like, then the problem is not like it's not like you're going to wake up one day, like go into like chemistry class and be like, this is it. It's an internal problem. It's the ability to learn how to not be bored. It's the ability to be like curious and interested in chemistry and physics and history and stuff like that. So this is the big problem that we have. And this is why like everyone's like, you guys get this as a society-wide problem. Why is it a society-wide problem? Because we have all these devices that give us the illusion that boredom or motivation comes from the outside world. It doesn't come from the outside world. I mean, it can sometimes. But generally speaking, the biggest thing that we've missed is that boredom or interest is cultivated internally. Yeah, so when someone says nothing excites me, so let me ask you a question. Is nothing exciting you a problem with you or the nothing? Right? Is the fault of nothing exciting you? Because even then, like your statement is beautiful because it's got the outside world and you, and there's a relationship between those two things. So where is the problem? And there's even physiologic evidence that it's within you. Right? So we know that, for example, anhedonia, inability to have pleasure, we know that amotivation, these are all things that can be affected by chemicals, drugs, medications, internal neurotransmitter levels. Right? So when someone is depressed, they don't feel motivated. When someone has vitamin D deficiency, they don't feel motivated. It has nothing to do with the outside world. In fact, one of the key hallmarks of clinical depression is anhedonia, which means the inability to enjoy things that you normally enjoy. Ergo, the enjoyment is not within the activity, it's within you. If it came from the activity, anhedonia would not exist. Okay? Oh yeah. So someone saying, I'm my ultimate Dark Souls boss fight, that is what Buddha discovered. What Buddha realized is that like he accomplished everything in the outside world and he's like, I'm still not happy. So like you are the only boss fight. All boss fights outside of you are not real boss fights. They're just proxies for yourself. Well said. Okay, let's talk about weed for a second. Oh yeah, dude, Elden Ring. Sign me up. Let's go, noobs. Tarnished, right? That's what it is now. All right, so here's the problem with weed. So as a psychiatrist, I recognize that there are medical uses for marijuana. I think the most convincing medical reason I've seen for using marijuana is to help people with opioid addiction. That's kind of counterintuitive. But it does seem to work well. Because there are a lot of physiologic problems that happen with heavy opiate use that sort of get better, and I think on balance it's a good thing to do. It has to be prescribed and stuff like that. The basic issue with marijuana, you have to understand how marijuana works in the brain. So the first thing is that marijuana works on these things called anandamide receptors. So the anandamide receptor was coined by an Indian guy, I think he was Indian because he named it after the Sanskrit word for bliss. So he was like, there are these bliss receptors in our brain, and that's what like marijuana acts on. So a lot of people think that marijuana makes people stupider, right? So people say like, oh, I've been smoking pot my entire life, like my IQ's fine. So marijuana doesn't work like that. What marijuana does, I think, is far more insidious. So if you look at the cannabinoid system in the brain, it involves habit formation and motivation. So like how can I say this? Early on in the brain, when you are reinforcing a behavior, it is the dopamine system that reinforces a behavior. Once you have a habit formed, the primary neurotransmitter is no longer dopamine, it's cannabinoids. So for example, like the first time I brush my teeth, I may really enjoy it. Or let's talk about video game addiction, for example. So the first time I play a video game, it's a lot of fun. It's dopaminergic, I enjoy it. Then I want to play again, and I want to play again, and each time I get less dopamine, less dopamine, less dopamine. And if you guys have been addicted to video games, you understand at some point you cross this critical threshold where you keep playing the game, but you stop having fun. And it's like, what the hell is going on at that point? Why are you even doing it if it's no longer even rewarding? So the interesting thing is if you understand neuroscience, there's like actually a good reason for that. And that's that like the shift of the behavior moves from a reward circuit to a habituated circuit. So habits in the brain are governed by a different circuit than like the dopamine system. So the nucleus accumbens, mesolimbic system, those are both dopaminergic systems that involve pleasure followed by behavioral reinforcement. At some point, you move into the autopilot circuits, which are different circuits of the brain. And once you enter into autopilot, it's not like there's any reward, right? So if you think about brushing your teeth, there's like no reward there anymore, right? Even if you think about dogs, for example, when you're training a dog at the very beginning in order to get them to fetch, you have to give them a reward because there's no inherent dopaminergic reward for fetching a ball or a stick. So you throw the ball, when the dog brings it, you give them a treat, boom, they get a hit of dopamine. You do it again, boom, they get a hit of dopamine. Boom, they get a hit of dopamine. You do that 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, their brain becomes habituated to it. It enters kind of the cannabinoid system, and you no longer need to provide a dopaminergic reward to engage in the behavior. Y'all get that? Gaming is the same. Once you move over to the cannabinoid system, then it becomes a habit. Then it becomes hard to break, despite the fact that it's not even fun. So why is marijuana a problem? I don't know exactly how, but marijuana screws up that circuit. Marijuana makes it hard. My observation, clinical observation, okay? So now, like, we know that basic neuroscience, but we don't know that neuroscience actually translates to human behavior. I haven't seen those studies yet. I don't think our stuff is sophisticated enough. But clinically, what I've seen is when people use pot, they fall into this weird habitual non-enjoyment way easier. They, like, fall into bad habits, and it's really, really hard to get them out of those habits. And what I've discovered is that if I can get them sober from marijuana, their ability to change their habits becomes way easier. Okay, so someone's saying, okay, so sorry for me throwing out a lot of words and you're confused. Do y'all get that or not? So here's a quick summary. Our brain has two circuits. One is a reward circuit that we release dopamine, which allows us to feel pleasure and reinforces a behavior. So for example, I'm drinking this iced coffee right now and it tastes good. So when I drink it, I get a hit of dopamine and it's like, ooh, I want more. Over time, if you look at people who develop addictive behaviors, they still engage in the behavior, but they don't actually feel any pleasure from it. The reason for that is because we have a separate circuit of the brain that starts to take over, which is the habit circuit. So once something becomes a habit, it no longer gives us a reward. But we're still driven to do it even though we don't enjoy it anymore. So when we get addicted to a video game and we just start like playing video games and like we don't even enjoy them anymore, that's a problem of our habit circuit getting messed up. And the habit circuit's primary neurotransmitter is an endocannabinoid or a cannabinoid. Endo means it's basically internal THC, right? It's a cannabis compound, like neurotransmitter, that is built within us. So when people use marijuana, the biggest problem that I see is it becomes hard for them to break habits. I'm not quite sure how it works, but I suspect that it has something to do with the fact that the cannabinoid receptors in the brain, the marijuana receptors in the brain, have something to do with habit formation and habit execution. And when people smoke pot, it's just hard for them to make changes in their life. Is that better? Yeah, so people are asking, do you have any advice for medical cannabis users? That's where, like, I think you should talk to your doctor, because the risks and benefits are like individualized, right? So like when I think about using medical cannabis, I look at an individual person, I think about, okay, what are the risks? What are the benefits? What do we gain? What do we lose? And for each individual person or situation, it's going to be slightly different. I quit weed 3 weeks ago and I still get cold sweats and very vivid dreams. Is that normal? I'm not sure, to be honest. So that too is something that you should talk to your doctor about, because cold sweats and vivid dreams, how can I say this? So you guys understand that like a substance causes particular changes, but the substance acts within an individual body, which means that like, you know, so the reason, does that make sense? Like there's an individual, so if you talk about the effects of marijuana, there is no such thing technically as the effects of marijuana, because the marijuana has to act within a human being. So the effects of marijuana are going to be filtered through an individual human being. So when we talk about the effects of marijuana, basically what we're doing is averaging the effects within 1,000 individuals and sort of saying this is the effect of the drug, which is scientifically valid. But in terms of any individual case, there's going to be a slightly different presentation, because your receptors, your metabolism, your brain is going to be different, which means I can take one compound and put it in 1,000 people and it'll act slightly differently. That's why if you look at like, you know, protocols for medication, it's not like there's one antidepressant that works equally for all people. We have 30 antidepressants that each have different efficacy within different people. And so that's what's tricky about medicine. It's also what makes it fun, because it's not like there's a one-size-fits-all solution. So in terms of your particular relationship to a substance, there's going to be a lot of individuation there. I want to try to hallucinate, but don't want drugs. Is there a healthy way? Yeah, absolutely, man. Meditate. So like, there are some things that I don't really recommend because I've seen some, you know, bad outcomes from this stuff, but a very rapid, very quick way that a lot of people will cultivate like odd experiences is holotropic breath work. It's not something, once again, I recommend. I think it's actually kind of dangerous, but, you know, people do it. So that can create some weird experiences. So like I personally, there's actually a subreddit post about this. We can kind of look at this. I personally, yeah, okay. So I personally like, so let's talk about hallucination for a second, all right? I guess we're doing neuroscience lectures, neuroscience and spirituality. So the first thing to understand is that a substance cannot create anything within you. All a substance can do is activate what already exists. Okay? Let me think about if that statement isn't precisely true, but generally speaking, it's true. So for example, like, you know, this is going to be sort of an indelicate example, but if we think about sildenafil or Viagra, right, which prolongs erections. So what it does is creates nitrous oxide, which prolongs the erection, but it activates circuitry that's already there. If we think about an SSRI, it activates circuitry that's already there. If we think about cannabinoids, right, why do we get high from some substances and don't get high from other substances? It's because some substances have chemical compounds that activate our existing machinery. So no medication, this is not entirely true, but generally speaking, medications and substances can only activate what exists. which has some very interesting implications. Because if a hallucinogenic compound causes you to like have certain experiences, it's literally activating particular machinery in unusual ways that exist within your brain. And so we sort of have a lot of like phenomenological evidence of this. If you look at William James, so William James wrote a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience. And what he basically pointed out is that like you have prophets and people who like meditate and people who have like visions. And it's kind of like using drugs. And he sort of shared that there's psychosis, there's hallucinogens, and there's like spiritual practice. And they all seem to share like a common sort of experience. And even it's kind of bizarre. So I remember when it came to working with my psychotic patients, especially at McLean Hospital, like I totally understood what they were experiencing. And like I was really good at working with psychotic patients, even, you know, and I think it's because like when you meditate, like I had shared experiences like that. So I sort of knew, I was like, when they were like, yeah, like, you know, there's this and this is going on. Oh, like I know what that's like. So one good example is in psychosis, you get a breakdown of the barrier between self and other. So some people who have psychosis believe that other people can read their thoughts, affect their thoughts. They believe they can read other people's thoughts. And sometimes when you meditate, you get that same experience. You get a breakdown between the self and the other. We also do know that MDMA, for example, seems to break down the barrier between self and other, which is why people feel very, very connected. DMT is another good example of this. Right? So there's this fundamental part of our brain that creates a barrier between us and someone else. And there are many different ways that that barrier can be broken down. In the case of pathologic illness, it gets broken down in a harmful way, right? So like people feel like they're being attacked, or the breakdown is like painful. They feel vulnerable, they feel naked, they feel watched. In the case of like meditation, it's like can be sort of neutral, for lack of a better term. And then for a lot of people, like with DMT and stuff, they find it to be like a positive experience. But remember that a lot of these hallucinogens will lead to like debilitating psychiatric effects sometimes, right? So like people will have PTSD from LSD, things like that. What was I going to talk about? I feel like I got distracted there for a second. Oh yeah, I was going to show you all this. So here's a good example. So we had, let's take a look at this post. So I had a spiritual awakening and my brain has been broken ever since. Help. I'm going to do my best to describe my experience, but what I've gone through has been so foreign to me that I will probably struggle to find the right words, so bear with me. Long story short, I read a book a while back that got me into meditation. The type of meditation I did was letting go of everything in my life and simply coming back to the breath. So every stressor of what was bothering me in that day, let go. Every material item I was attached to, let go. All the relationships I had in my life, let go. Things got trippy. This is where I began to lose words for what happened. My whole reality of life began to warp. I didn't know up from down. I didn't know right from wrong. I had no idea what was going on. But this wasn't a bad experience. I found a really deep sense of peace through this. I found, in a weird way, a place in life/my mind that felt absolutely amazing. It also seemed to me to be theoretically possible state of mind to live as, but felt extremely hard to do so. Daily life got in the way, relationships didn't see life the way I saw it, and the task of just being human seemed to keep me from maintaining this state of existence. There's so much that happened during this time that I would love to unpack. The things I saw and experienced were otherworldly, just absolutely insane, awesome, makes you question the true fabric of reality and how everything is connected as a whole. But I digress, because I don't think that stuff is very important to focus on right now in my current circumstance. What I'm struggling with right now is how to balance this incredible experience in my current life. My brain is broken. I don't know how to fit what I went through in a life that requires me to work, maintain what now feels like fake relationships, money, community, etc. I'm just constantly confused. I don't understand what I'm doing. I don't know what I should be doing, and I don't know how to properly implement anything into my life anymore. I would love to run off and go join some spiritual community to unpack this, but something feels off about taking my life in that direction. I feel small, very dumb, and helpless. I look to advice of those around me, but nobody I'm near has ever experienced anything close to what I experienced, so I'm not getting any decent advice. I don't have any concrete questions to ask, but I don't know what the fuck is going on at all. Help, I guess. I don't know. I'm just at a loss, sad, tired, because these last 2 years have been exhausting. Thanks for reading. Okay. So, this is why meditation should be done under the guidance of a guru. So this is something that's changed a lot. One of the biggest things that we've lost in the explosion of meditation in the West is that these kinds of things happen. Thankfully, what's happened is we've gotten a dilution of meditation techniques. So no one is really doing powerful meditation techniques anymore, or not on a whole scale. So when you do truly powerful meditation techniques, these kinds of things are not only common, but even expected and part of the goal of meditation. And so the challenge is that, like, when you have a guru, like, that's a spiritually enlightened person who understands exactly what happened and can guide you through that. So let's try to, like, unpack a couple of important things here. So the first is, when you become spiritually, like, as you start to have spiritual revelations, your life changes. So a lot of people, this is the big paradox of spirituality, is they start meditating for worldly goals. Right? So they say, I want to be happier. I want to be more successful. I want to get into a flow state. So they're chasing worldly things, and they start to meditate for a worldly reason. But as you meditate, the goal that you were aiming for becomes less important to you the more successful you meditate. So it's kind of bizarre, but like, I want to meditate so I can study better, so I can get straight A's. And if you really do a good job meditating, what will happen is you will stop caring about getting straight A's. You may actually get better at it, but by the time you find you reach your goal, you discover something even more bizarre, which is that you don't want the goal anymore, which is sort of like the weird paradox of meditation. So what happens sometimes is when you do meditation, it starts with a focusing practice with a verb. It starts with the mind. And then over time, you shed the mind. And when you enter a no-mind state, that's called dhyan. So once you're in the no-mind state for a long time, sometimes you will experience something called samadhi. So samadhi is a state of temporary enlightenment. And what the hell does that mean? So we have a shell, we have a form, we have an identity. I'm Alok, I'm a doctor, I'm a streamer. But the truth of the matter is that I'm none of those things, right? So when let's say I go outside and I lay in the grass, I don't have a name at that point. I don't have a profession at that point. I just have this raw experience of laying in a grass. And once we have that raw experience, what we really find is when I forget myself, when I absorb myself in a particular task, and I lose my mind, I lose my sense of identity, even when I play a video game, and you stop being you stop having bills to pay, you stop being someone who, is failing out of college. All you are is like one with the video game, and it feels wonderful. So even like in gaming, there's like a weird sort of loss of identity, which can feel very therapeutic. That's how it serves as an escape. So when we meditate, we sort of shed all of our worldly things. And so this is where in the West, people will describe this as ego death. So who you are ceases to exist. And if you have one of these experiences and then you lose that state of consciousness, because that's what it is, it's a state of consciousness. We can even kind of go back and see that, right? So let's look at, so like he describes it as otherworldly, just insane, awesome, absolutely. How to balance this incredible experience in my current life. My brain is broken. I don't know how to fit what I went through in a life that requires me to work, maintain what feels like fake relationships, community, etc. So this is why enlightened people tend to become so this is why enlightened people don't live worldly lives, right? So I want you guys to understand this. The profession of a monk, where you don't have any possessions or things like that, it's not like one day someone was like, okay, I'm going to become a monk. And the requirements of becoming a monk are like, I'm not going to have any money, I'm not going to have any possessions, I'm not going to get married. That's not how it works. It's the other way around. Someone became enlightened and they're like, oh, this crap that other people are into, I no longer need. It doesn't serve anything for me. So I'm going to just give up all that crap because those are all material attachments. So like, I don't need it. It's like I'm done with it. It's kind of like when you're 3 years old, you've got your little teddy bear, Pinky, And then when you're like 10, you don't need pinky anymore, so you just shed it. So the path of spiritual growth is one of shedding, and sometimes to catastrophic consequences for your worldly life, i.e. check out Buddha. So what happened with Buddha is he was a king, he was married, he had a kid, he was unhappy, he became enlightened, and then he was like, yeah, well, I don't need any of that stuff anymore, GG, I'm out, right? So being truly enlightened can sometimes be incompatible with living a worldly life. Okay? And so what tends to happen is it can be very difficult if you have this experience of what these people call true reality, right? And so like this person kind of describes this. Then it can be very hard to integrate into the world because you don't really like care about it. Like you begin to realize that all of the things that you care about and are attached to are sort of false. They're like all made up. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but like, let me give you all an example. So, in some parts of the world, there are these things called PTAs, which are parent-teacher associations. And sometimes people get super caught up in like PTA elections. So you've got some dad or some mom who's like, like they really believe that something should happen at their school. And like PTA elections are super fierce. They can be very negative and like negative campaigning and petty, and people get so caught up in it. And then like in the grand scheme of things, like 10,000 years from now, or even like next year, or even other people in the PTA, like who the hell cares? Right? So we can also see this with like online gaming, where it's like, oh, I really want this cosmetic, or I really want to get this rank, or I really want this, like who the hell cares? It's just like bits of data in some server somewhere that a year from now, no one is going to care about. So it's kind of interesting because when we look at the human mind, it attaches and places importance on generally things that don't matter at all. On the objective sense, they don't really matter at all to anyone, right? It's real to you, though. Your mind attaches. So when you get a state of samadhi, you get free of all of that stuff. So you can get over a PTA election. You can get over video gaming. You can even get over a breakup, right? So right when you break up, you're full of attachment. And so it hurts a lot. Oh my God, there's no other fish in the sea. You lose all perspective. And then once you get over the breakup, you're like, oh, wow, like that actually wasn't that big of a deal. You're kind of detached. You're kind of chill about it. Maybe it was best for everyone involved. It wasn't the right relationship for me anyway. And so as you detach from things, you become more at peace. You're okay at letting things go. And so sometimes in meditation, you have like this hyper experience of samadhi, which can like detach you from everything. And then you begin to see the nature of the universe for what it is. And then like when you come back down, right? So you enter back into the regular state of consciousness, you're like, I don't know what to do with all this crap. So it can be very bewildering. And this is why, generally speaking, meditation should be done under the guidance of a guru and not learned from a book and done on your own. But nowadays we live in a world where like that's just how information is disseminated. And I'm very, very glad that, most of the meditation techniques that are incredibly powerful are not taught. So we'll do Om chanting on stream, for example, but there are other more powerful mantras that we're not going to teach on stream because they can cultivate these kinds of experiences with great regularity, right? There are certain kinds of practices that you can do that will cultivate these kinds of experiences with great regularity. But if you do them, it's going to mess up your life like it messed up this person's life, right? So there are practices that you can do that can cultivate these states of mind. These are advanced systems of meditation. And there's a reason that they're hidden because they're unsafe to use. And what do we mean by unsafe? So there are case reports of meditation-induced psychosis, right? So we know that there are actually mental health illnesses that can manifest when you like lose yourself in these experiences, a la William James, right? So who sort of noticed that like using drugs, becoming psychotic, and like praying or meditation all had a common root within the brain. Because once again, remember that everything has to happen with our brain. And so like that's like why we should be careful when we meditate. Now, the good news is that if you've had this experience, generally speaking, if you can manage to reintegrate, it's going to help you over time. So this is where, and then people may ask, like, okay, if I've had these experiences, what should I do? So the simplest thing is that if you don't have any more, over time, you will reintegrate into life on your own. So the things that feel meaningless to you over time will start to become more meaningful. The good news is you'll still hold on to a little bit of detachment, but like over time, you'll get sucked back into life. The other thing is that if you can find a real teacher or guru, like that's really what you need for guidance. And then you can start to like really understand like how to put together your life. So for example, I had a period of crisis where I was deciding to become a monk or like not become a monk. And then like met my wife and fell in love. And it's like, oh my God, like, do I become a monk or do I like, do I choose to love this woman? And then I realized, oh, it's all stupid. It's actually like an artificial dichotomy created by my mind. And there's no difference between being a monk and getting married, which I know sounds kind of weird, but when you really understand it, what I sort of realized is like the work of a monk is internal. It has nothing to do with who you're like, it has nothing to do with who you're married to. It's all about internal detachment. So you can be a monk in the world or you can be a monk outside the world. It's all the same. And even then, what I sort of realized is that my becoming a monk was actually an attachment. It was like a scam because it was like a way for my ego to elevate myself above all of the people who were better at stuff than I was. It was like, oh, like, since I suck at this, I'm going to become a monk and be better than those noobs. Noobs? It's an ego scam. So one of my teachers once told me there are two kinds of egos. There's a regular ego, which you see in the world. And here at ashrams or monasteries, we have a second kind of ego, which is way worse, which is the ego of having no ego. It's like, noobs, bitches, look at how small my ego is. Scrubs, get on my level. Get egoless, bitch. Look at how spiritual I am. Look at how fashionable my malas are. And look at how I wear all this like Lululemon clothing. Like, look at how spiritual I am. Right? Like, you can't be as spiritual as me because you didn't spend $200 on a pair of yoga pants. Oh my God, I can't believe you're drinking all that terrible stuff. I'm drinking things that are so much cleaner than you. You should do a juice cleanse like me. Dumbass. I don't know why you're so polluted. Your energies are so bad. You should have clean energies like I have clean energies. Right? It's the ego of having no ego. And so that's what I was chasing. And I was like, yeah, like, I'm better than you. Oh, you got into med school? I failed out 3 times. Too bad you're a materialistic noob, and I'm spiritually enlightened. Get on my level. You know? It's terrible. So kind of going back to this stuff, you should have a guru ideally to guide you through these things. They'll help you reintegrate. And so what I sort of discovered is that actually I don't need to reintegrate. There's no such thing as integration or deintegration. It's just it's all the same. I carry myself with me wherever I go. So I'm going to have attachments or desires, whether I'm sitting in a monastery in India or whether I'm married to a woman. It's all going to be the same. I'm still going to be attached to stuff. And that the work of spirituality is internal. It has nothing to do with what you wear. It's so it's tough. So if you have a spiritual experience, I'd say find truly spiritual seekers and try to find someone who has gone through what you've gone through and understand that it can be earth-shattering. For this particular person who kind of feels like their relationships aren't worthwhile, I think that's okay. You can trust that instinct. You can continue faking it for a while, but continue your internal spiritual study and start to really pay attention to yourself and figure out what you need, what you want. I'd say very concretely, go visit different places where people meditate on a regular basis and seek some kind of guidance, right? So you got to be careful because a lot of these are culty, which is challenging, but that's just how it is. And that's up to your karma. So whether you find what you seek will be depending on your karma. How do you deal with ego death yourself? How do you balance this? Okay, let me just think about how to answer that. It's a great question. The best thing I'd say is you just loll at it, right? So most of the time what happens is I don't get too egotistical, but sometimes I notice, so here's the way that I view my ego. I view my ego like a sneaky little dog that sneaks in and does things without me realizing it. So before I realize it, I'll catch myself, okay? So for example, I'll give you guys an example from today. So this is how I deal with my ego. So I was about to stream, and I was wearing this fleece. And I was thinking to myself, if I wear this fleece and I show the Harvard logo, everyone will see the Harvard logo. It may go well because maybe people will like it. It'll give me a sense of authority. And then I was like, oh, I don't want to come across as not being a Harvard Andy. So I want to be humble and not wear the Harvard fleece. And then I was like, wait a minute. That's still me trying to come across as humble. That's fucking egotistical. So I'm just going to wear what I'm going to wear, because as long as I'm thinking about like being perceived as humble, that's ego. You guys get that? So the ego is like sneaky. Does that make sense? So the way that I balance ego, I don't balance it. It's like an infestation in my mind that it like shows up from time to time. And then when you see it, when you notice the action of the ego, then you resist it. Because it's like, oh, let me be humble. Let us be humble. Then everyone will think we are humble. Look at me. Look at how humble I am. Oh, wonderful. Look at Dr. K. So enlightened. Arre wah. I wish I could be like him. Let everyone envy me. It will be great. And then I will respond humbly. I will say, I'm just like you. You are just as good as I am. See? And then we'll be like, Arre baapre. He is so humble. He is so uplifting. Such a good person he is. It's all fucking ego. Like, it's all fucking ego. You guys get that? So there's so the way you balance it is you train yourself to catch it. Because it's sneaky. Right? And then like you recognize, okay, what is my ego wanting me to do? And then sometimes you need ego. So ego like is adaptive to functioning in the world. So like sometimes like, you know, if someone does something, like take something that's yours. So the idea of mine and yours is rooted in the ego because it involves me and you, and that's what ego is. But there are times where people will be like, hey, like they want to take something of mine and I'm going to say no. So in that moment, I recognize my ego is saying like, hey, this guy's trying to take something of yours. It's mine. You don't get to take that. Right? And then I'll be like, okay, ego, like I'm going to let you out of the cage and you do your stuff. So then my ego comes out. I let it come out. It fights with the person. Hopefully I win. And then I like kind of restrain it. So this is something that is very important. All the functions of the mind, emotions, ego, all these things, they're not evil. It's just you should be in control of it instead of it being in control of you. Does that make sense? So like I treat the ego as like, you know, I kind of think of myself as a general and I've got different like things. So there are times where, for example, negative emotions like sorrow and pain, like you let them out. Ego, you let it out. Joy, you let it out. But you should always be in control of it. Got it? That's good. What is you? So, great question. So here's our next meditation practice for the day. Let me think about this. We're going to be on a Jnana Yoga bend today, okay? So that's the question, is what is you? So let me put it to you this way. There's a lot of stuff. So by the way, there's the Atman Pada in Dr. K's guide, which is the path of the self, in which we explain a lot of this stuff in more detail. We'll give you meditation practices, exercises. So if you're super interested in that stuff, check that out because there's more detail there. We'll still answer the question now. So let's ask a couple of questions. So are you you now? Question number one. Are you you now? Are you not you? So the answer is generally like people are like, yes, I'm me. Okay. So were you you 10 years ago? The answer to that question is also yes. Okay. So now what we've determined is that there's a you over here 10 years ago, and there's a you over here in the present. And then the other thing that we've sort of discovered is that there's differences between these two things, right? So your body is different, your hair is different, your mind is different, your knowledge is different. Would you be you if you lost a limb? Yeah, you'd still be you, right? And so were you you before you learned everything that you learned over the last decade? Yeah, that's still you, right? And so then the question becomes, okay, so if these things change and they're not really you, or actually that's a conclusion. So then we sort of arrive at the conclusion that like, I was me before I knew everything I knew now. Therefore, everything that I've learned is not me, right? Because I was me before that. So it's like, The you is the thing that is constant and doesn't include all the things that I've learned. Even people who've lost a limb. So like a good example of this is, I'll work with women who have had miscarriages. And this is a huge part of mental health that I think doesn't get talked about enough. But then like women feel like they're not women if they've had miscarriages, right? They feel like a fundamental failure, but they're still okay. They're like good people, normal human beings. So I'll work with them to try to help them understand you're still you. So the you before you had a miscarriage and the you after you had a miscarriage, you're still like a good human being. But like we identify with all these different attributes that we have. So then the question is like, despite those changes, were you still you? And the answer is yes, right? So even if I lose a limb, I'm still me. So then the question becomes, then what is that you? What is that which transcends knowledge, growth, changes in body, changes in experience, identity even? Your identity was different. Maybe 10 years ago, you were a gifted kid. And today, you're a burnt out gifted kid, right? So even that identity change, you're still you. So then if you want to understand what the you is, I'd say take any attribute that you think is you. And then ask yourself, was I still me before I had this attribute? When did this happen? Right? So someone's been looking at Dr. K's guide because they have the answer there. And so that's what you is. And y'all tell me what the answer is, all right? So you have to do this on your own. You have to figure out what is it that is me. What is the me? So there are a couple of words that people will use. So they'll use the transcendent you. So that which transcends any particular attribute. No, so one person is saying change. It's actually the exact opposite. The whole point is that there has been lots of change, but you are still you despite the change. So it is that which is constant, not that which changes. So then the question becomes, what is that which changes? And what is that which is constant? Right? So then people are saying the consciousness is me. So then, life is confusing. I'm a perception of myself. I'd say I kind of disagree with that. I'd say that you are that which you do not perceive. Right? You are the stuff beyond perception. You are the perceiver as opposed to the perception. That's what I'd say, if that makes sense. Right? So then that's kind of interesting because if you're the perceiver instead of the perception, all attributes come from the perception. Good, bad, sexy, ugly, rich, poor, capable, incapable, gifted, not gifted, failure, success. All of those are of the perception, not of the perceiver. Y'all get that? And this is why meditation is so transformative and enlightenment is leads to bliss, because all of your suffering comes from the perception. It comes from the failure or the success, the sexy or the ugly, the rich or the poor. It doesn't come from, that's where all the suffering is. Right? I want to meditate more, but I always make the excuse that the environment isn't right. What should I do? It's a good question. So the first thing is try to figure out which part of you is making the excuse. Where is the excuse coming from? What is the excuse doing for you? Right? So this is where I'd say just ignore the excuse and do it. You can go down that route. That's totally fine. There are other things you can do, like find a sangha. Right? You can find people, go to a meditation meeting, because then once you're there, everyone's going to meditate together. But I'd really ask yourself, what is the goal of the excuse? What are you trying to avoid by meditating? Or what are you escaping from by giving up meditation? That, if you can answer that question, you'll be able to remove the foundation of your resistance. So how does one attract better friends to their life? That's a very good question. So, how do you attract better friends? Okay. Let's talk about that. Maybe we'll stop after this. Okay. So if you want to attract better friends in life, the main thing that you need to do is learn how to set healthy boundaries. And so people are like, okay, how do I set healthy boundaries? The main thing that you need... Hold on. There's stuff going on. Okay. So if people say, how do I attract better friends in life? It's a good question. So I'd say the most important thing to developing a healthy friend group is to be able to set good boundaries. And then the question becomes, why don't we set good boundaries? So there are a couple of there are three basic reasons why we don't set good boundaries. So the first is that it's issues of identity. So we want to be perceived a certain way. Do you guys hear that? Okay. I'll try that again. Okay. There's like noise coming from my walls. All right, so if you want to set good boundaries. The fuck? They're in the walls. I gotta go pee, chat. I'm drinking too much coffee. We're gonna give this a second. Then we're gonna come back. It's gonna be 30 seconds. I'm gonna go pee, and we're gonna then talk about good friends, okay? Be right back. 30 seconds. All right, let's go. So people are wondering, how do I develop a healthier friend group? So in my experience, the biggest problems with developing a healthy friend group are the inability to set healthy boundaries. And so then the question kind of becomes, okay, what does that mean, setting healthy boundaries? So sometimes you'll become a scapegoat in your friend group. Sometimes you'll become a doormat in your friend group. People will take advantage of you. You won't stand up for yourself. It's not just, I did wash my hands, calm down, chat. It's not just friend groups as well. It's also kind of in the workplace, right? So sometimes you'll want to be perceived by your boss a particular way. If you want proof that I wash my hands, you got to touch them. You know what I'm saying? So there's no proof. There's no wetness scale on Twitch, and thank God for that, because oh my God, some streamers would be so much more popular. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's go back to boundaries. So we can say set healthy boundaries, right? We can say oh my God, stop being a doormat. Don't stand up for yourself. Don't let people abuse you. All that good stuff. But the question is, if you want to understand how to set good boundaries, it's not about what you should do, because these people know that they should set healthier boundaries. It's the things that get in the way. It's the emotional drives or the internal drives that prevent you from setting good boundaries. So for example, if your friends leave you behind, you know that that's not okay. And you may want to call them out on it. You know exactly what you should do, but you don't do it. And so if you want to really learn how to set good boundaries, what you really have to start with is the three primary drivers that cause you to set bad boundaries. So the first driver is a sense of identity. So oftentimes we allow ourselves to be trampled because we want to be perceived a particular way, right? So if your friends, you don't want to be perceived as whiny by your friends. You don't want to be perceived as contrarian by your friends. You don't want to be perceived as greedy by your boss or whatever. You don't want to seem annoying, so you don't ask a professor for a letter of recommendation, even though it's their job. You don't want to inconvenience them. So we want to preserve a particular sense of identity, and we don't want to ruffle other people's feathers. We want to be perceived as likable, friendly, positive, down for whatever. So it's our desire to shape the perceptions of others that causes us to tolerate bad behavior in friend groups, because we're afraid that if we if they perceive us a particular way, then they won't like us, and then, I'm in trouble. The second thing is that we will oftentimes allow boundary violations out of a desire to control the other person. And I know that sounds kind of weird because aren't they the ones controlling you? No, it's the other way around. So if you raise a problem with someone, they're going to react in a certain way. And it is your fear of their reaction that changes your behavior towards them. And when you change your behavior, you're controlling them to not react to you in that way. Does that kind of make sense? So if I have a friend who, makes fun of me way too much, what I'm going to want to do, if I tell them, hey, I don't want you to do that, it hurts my feelings, and I call them out in front of our friend group, I'm afraid that they'll stop inviting me. I'm afraid that they will, talk behind my back. I'm afraid that they'll message people and they'll dislike it. I'll make them feel bad. They'll lash out. They'll get passive aggressive. So there are all kinds of reactions that the other person could have, which I want to prevent. And since I want to prevent them, I'm not going to act in a particular way. So in a bizarre way, what I end up doing is behaving in a particular way to control someone else's behavior. The funny thing is that this becomes a self-defeating strategy, because as I tolerate that negative behavior, as I sort of don't rock the boat is another way of talking about it. Another phrase that people will say is walking on eggshells, right? So you guys may know people in your life where you walk on eggshells around them, because if you say, if someone asks you, hey, how was the food? And you say, pass the salt, they'll be like, oh, screw you, you don't like my food, blah, 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 blah. And so then you're sitting there, eating bland food, and you're never going to ask for the salt because you don't want to piss someone off. So a lot of what happens around bad boundary setting, and we see this a lot in personality disorders, where there's even a book about borderline personality disorder called Walking on Eggshells. And what happens with BPD is that everyone will walk on eggshells around you because they're trying to keep this person from flipping out. And what actually happens is the more you walk on eggshells, the fewer boundaries you set, the less feedback they get, and their behavior actually gets worse. So the second reason we allow ourselves to be doormats in relationships, and the reason we end up with bad friend groups, is because we try to control their negative behavior by being very accommodating. Third reason is simply an emotional need. So oftentimes the reason that we tolerate negative friendships and relationships is because we have emotional needs that we're afraid won't be met elsewhere. So I'm afraid I'm going to be lonely. I'm afraid no one will ever love me. I'm afraid I'm going to be have no one at my birthday party. I'm afraid I'm not going to have anyone to game with. So we have all these emotional needs that can be filled through friendship or relationships. And it is our fear that those needs won't be met outside of this relationship that causes us to say, please, please, please don't abandon me. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be alone. And so you tolerate all kinds of negative behavior with your current friend group because of your fear of being alone or unlovable or whatever. That too becomes a self-defeating prophecy, because as you tolerate bad behavior in the friend group, you feel isolated, you feel more alone. The more alone you feel, the more you cling to the friend group. The more you cling to the friend group, the more bad behavior you tolerate. The more bad behavior you tolerate, the more you feel isolated and alone, the more you cling to them. So it kind of it's a self-defeating cycle. And so setting healthy boundaries comes down to understanding these three components and kind of working on them, right? So what are the ways in which I can get my emotional needs met? So you can grow out of unhealthy friendships by cultivating other friendships. Get a dog, right? If you can realize that you can get your emotional needs met, you're not dependent on this person for your emotional needs being met, then you can let go of the relationship. You can work on your sense of identity, or ahamkar. Once you sort of realize, okay, I am a good person, I don't need this person for validation, go hiking, go climb a mountain, go accomplish something. As your self-esteem rises, you will no longer be dependent on them for your sense of identity. And so this is basically how you cultivate healthy relationships, right? I feel like I left one out for a second. Emotional needs being met, identity, and controlling behavior. Yeah, so this is the other big one, is you have to recognize that you can't ever control someone else's behavior. You just have to act in accordance with what feels right to you. Because you can't ever control another human being. Believe me, we have tons of parents in our parent program who have tried. Right? We have I worked with a ton of people who try really hard to control someone else's behavior. You just can't do it. It's absurd. And so you have to like live in accordance with what you feel is right and then let other people reject you. And once you let other people reject you, you give them the option to reject you, that becomes a relationship that is even, on an even playing field. And once you give people the option of rejecting you and they accept you, that's going to boost your self-esteem, right? Because you're drawing the line. You're saying, hey, like this is not okay with me. And if they choose to participate in a relationship with you, then it'll be a respectful relationship because you've drawn your line and they've chosen to accept it. Y'all are getting along. Right? So where does unhealthy boundaries come from in relationships? They come from these three things: a sense of identity, a sense of controlling the other person, and having your emotional needs met. So how should you develop a healthier friend group? You have to work on these three things. Because if you can tolerate the idea that like maybe I'll be alone, if you can tolerate the idea that someone, if you do something, they may not like it, they may reject you, then you'll be able to develop healthy relationships. Right? If you can work on your sense of identity, then you'll develop healthy friendships. So someone's saying, but I always get rejected. Yeah, I'm not so sure that's true. And even if it is true, then maybe what you should do is take a closer look at your behavior. There may be something that you're doing that contributes to the rejection. Right? The other reason that sometimes people will always get rejected is because of the places that they choose to apply their efforts to. Right? So like, you know, I think you got to be careful. Like, where are you applying for acceptance? Let's put it that way. If you got a 2.0 GPA and you're just applying to Harvard, Stanford, and Yale, and you say I have a 100% acceptance rate, like maybe there's a problem there, right? Maybe it's because you should modify where you're applying. There's a value system in that example, but I don't think that that's quite I don't think that inherently that means you're like not a good person. But oftentimes what we tend to have, what we see is something called the repetition compulsion, which is that human beings will like put themselves in the same situation like over and over and over again. So, for example, the kind of person, I'll give you guys just a simple example. So I was working with someone, this is very common, who was using online dating, and the only people that they would reach out to would be not necessarily the people that they're attracted to, but they reached out only to people that they felt would accept them because they were a little bit busted. So I have low self-esteem. I'm gonna, when I'm looking at online dating profiles, I assume that people who are like better than I am will reject me anyway. So I only apply, or I only try to match with people who like I think will accept me for my low self-esteem. And in doing so, I commit to a self-fulfilling prophecy of like, I'm a little bit busted. They're very busted because my self-esteem actually causes me to like underestimate what my actual value is, what my actual esteem is. And so like I choose the most broken people to date. And since they're the most broken, the likelihood of two broken people having a successful relationship is quite low. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But it has everything to do with the way that you're selecting the person. Right? And I recognize there's some problems there because what does broken mean and all that good stuff. But I think basically, if you really think about successful relationships, they usually involve some degree of stability and groundedness to handle the ups and downs of all relationships, right? All relationships have ups and downs, and you need to be internally resilient to handle those. No. So someone's saying, stop being attracted to brokenness. Got it. Incorrect. I'm not saying don't be attracted to it. I'm saying recognize what makes it feel safe to only reach out to people who are busted. It's about safety, right? Not about attraction. If you're attracted to a broken person, that's fine. But if subconsciously in the back of your mind, the reason you're reaching out to them is because you're like, this person would be willing to date someone as pathetic as me. And if that's the main criteria, like that's not a good criteria to reach out to someone. It feels safe though, because you're decreasing your likelihood of rejection and you're increasing your likelihood of failure. You guys get that? So like, You have to be willing to be rejected to succeed. It's safety, not attraction. And by all means, I think if you want to date someone who's broken, go for it, but do it for the right reasons. Don't do it out of a fear of rejection or failure, right? Do it because you're attracted to them, because you're interested in them, because you want a relationship with them. Those should be the foundations of that relationship. Not this person may be willing to accept me because I'm busted. Like, that's not a healthy foundation to start with. And it doesn't mean you're doomed to failure. I've seen relationships flourish with two very broken people. See this a lot in addiction treatment, by the way, where like 90% of relationships fail, but man, do the 10% of relationships, when they make it, they really make it. It's awesome. Beautiful to see. All right. So we've done a lot of Jnana Yoga meditation today. I've been talking now for like over 2 hours straight. Got to rest that voice. You know what I'm saying? So like if you guys want, do the bathroom meditation, pay attention to boredom. Like we try to integrating more Jnana Yoga into our practices nowadays. I recognize they're not formal practices. Maybe starting we're not streaming next week. Maybe even starting tomorrow or the week after, we'll do more formal meditation. You guys want to do advanced meditation in 2 weeks? Yes, no? You want intro stuff or advanced stuff? Okay, so here's the thing. If you guys want to do advanced meditation, you guys need to do basic meditation. So I'm going to give you all homework, okay? So this stuff is going to be, there's a meditation playlist on YouTube. You guys can check that out. I think doing any kind of breath practices on Dr. K's guide, you can look at the meditation index. So do breath practices because I'm going to introduce you all to Svara Yoga in 2 weeks. Okay, but Svara Yoga is like, you're not going to be able to do it unless you do breath practices. So Dr. K's guide is the best organized. Otherwise, check out YouTube and look for some kind of like, start with Nadi Shuddhi, but essentially you want Anulom Vilom in Dr. K's guide. And so if you can do that one for like a week, then you'll be prepared for what we're going to teach in 2 weeks on stream. Okay? Svara Yoga, it's not going to kill you. Yoga doesn't mean postures. That's just asana. Yoga means union. And if people are curious what yoga means, since we were talking about this, union of what? It's union of you with that supreme consciousness, the true self. Also means yoke, that which shackles you. So it's freedom of that which shackles you in order to join with that which you are. It's cool. Like Sanskrit's neat that way. It's got a lot of these weird like dual meanings. So yoga is about freedom, and the word means shackle, right? So you guys get how like shackle and freedom are sort of like two sides of the same coin. Who are you rating, chat? Small streamer? Big streamer? Okay, give me small. Give me small, dude. Andy Milanakis? Sure, we can rate Andy. You guys, but... Koikva? Lethal Frag. Let's look at... Okay. Lethal Frag's Glass Crab. Who are y'all going to stick around with? Let me ask you that. You guys want to raid Sasha Gray? She's streaming. DJ Knight. Yes, Sasha. Okay, well, let's raid Sasha. All right. All right, we're going to raid Sasha Gray. Looks like what she's reading something about. I don't know what this is. Last one to jump in the pool is gay and then jumped into the pool. How I figured it out that if I don't know what she's doing, but it looks like fun. All right, send Sasha Gray some love, the positive kind, okay? Not the perverted kind, chat. Take care. We'll see y'all later.